everybody, it's Eric from EPautos.com, your libertarian car guy. I wanted to talk about something this morning that's come up again, which is the subject of insurance coverage. And embedded in that is the fact that, of course, it is mandatory coverage, and everybody is talking about the increasingly unaffordable cost of this mandatory insurance, which obviously has to do with the fact that it's mandatory. If you can be forced to pay for anything, inevitably the cost of that is going to go up. But there's an additional driving factor here that I wanted to address, which is that we're being made to pay for costs, both potential and actual, that are incurred by other people. What do I mean? Well, as you can see, I'm driving my old truck today. I'm waiting for the delivery company to drop off a new Forester for me to test drive. But the point is, I have this old truck. It's a 2002 Nissan Frontier, and it's hardly worth anything except to me. It's a very low book value. I used to pay next to nothing to cover this truck, which made the coverage, or being forced to buy the coverage, not too objectionable because the cost was low. I was paying something like $150 a year for a liability-only policy, which is reasonable because, again, it's an old truck. It's not worth much except to me. And I have decades of accident-free driving, no claims filed against me, not even a seatbelt ticket, if you can believe that. And that's because I tend to be very alert for the presence of armed government workers who are going to try to give me a ticket for not buckling up for safety. Anyway, that's a subject for another rant. The point is that I am perhaps the archetypical ideal person in terms of being a low-risk person, and that was reflected in my policy. Well, over the last 2 years, my insurance has almost tripled. I'm now paying $300 for the same liability-only coverage. Why is that? Why are you paying more? There are a lot of people out there who are similar to me in that they prefer to drive an older, paid-for, low-value, except to them, vehicle. They do not choose to go out and buy one of these new expensive vehicles. And let me get into that a little bit. I just finished test driving the 25 Infiniti QX80, and that thing has a starting price, a base price, around $82,000. The one that they sent me stickered out for more than $115,000. Now, if you went back about 10 years or so ago, a vehicle that cost that much was an exotic. They were very rare, very uncommon. Yeah, they existed, but there were just a few of them. Well, now it is common for people to pay $50,000, $75,000 for a vehicle. Most half-ton trucks now on the low end start around $50,000, and by the time you add a few options, you're looking at $75,000, $80,000. And of course, in addition to that, oh look, there's a revenue collector. Look at the oink sitting there on the left side of the road, just waiting to hassle somebody for speeding. Yeah, that's what we pay the guy to sit there in his $50,000 police pursuit special to hassle somebody for speeding. Ugh, that just ruined my day. Anyway, the point is, people choose to buy vehicles like that. Oh, and let me back up and say it's not just the expensive trucks and SUVs. It's also these electric vehicles that the government has been pushing onto people that have increased not just the cost of vehicles, but the numbers of them that are out there. Why is that important? Well, the more of them that are out there, the greater the odds that perhaps you will hit one of them or they will hit you. In other words, you might be involved in an accident. It doesn't matter whether you actually are. The possibility is sufficient to justify, in the minds of these insurance mobsters, making you pay twice or three times, and it's going to continue to go up from there, for the coverage that you're paying, even though you are continuing to choose to try to save money by driving an older, paid-for vehicle that wouldn't cost a lot to fix if you got into an accident. Really interesting. So how do we deal with this? Well, obviously, I'd, in the first place, like to see insurance made optional. Meaning, if you want to buy it, great, go ahead and buy it, but nobody should be forced to buy it. And I know that that's an appalling idea to many people whose reflexive response will be, well, if you don't force people to buy insurance, they're going to drive uncovered, and then when they hit you, you're going to be left holding the bag. Well, in the first place, that's a hypothetical, and I think it's immoral to punish people, because being made to pay money is being punished, for harms you have not caused. I understand that people are afraid and anxious and all of that, that they might get hit by somebody who doesn't have insurance. Their fear does not impose a binding obligation on me or anyone else. The only time an obligation is incurred is when you actually cause harm to someone else. Then, of course, then you're responsible. You should be made to pay, whatever that entails. So there's that factor. And I think it's a really important factor. And the other factor is that it's a non sequitur. The fact is, there are lots of people who don't drive with insurance despite the law. Think about all the illegal aliens. Me gusta. They do it. So the law doesn't really matter. It's kind of like laws that say, oh, you can't carry a gun here. It's a gun-free zone. Yeah, tell it to the criminal who decides to shoot up the place. Obviously, if he's going to shoot up the place, he doesn't care about the laws that forbid murder. Why would he care about laws that forbid him from having the implements to commit the murder? It's low IQ, thoughtless reasoning. Anyway, back to the main thing here. I think that people who elect and choose to buy one of these very expensive vehicles, $50,000, $80,000, $100,000, they should properly bear the increased costs of covering that, not the people who choose not to. I think that should be reflected in the cost of their coverage. No offense. Nobody has to drive around in a $50,000 or an $80,000 vehicle. And if that's your choice, you're absolutely entitled to it. But I do think it's legitimate, it's fair, that the cost of your coverage be increased to reflect that. Another thing that could be done, and that could be done in tandem with that, is to just add, say, 10, 20 cents to the cost of a gallon of gasoline that would provide liability coverage, basic liability coverage, let's say, for everybody up to a certain point. Like let's just say $30,000, so that would encompass the majority of people who don't have exorbitantly expensive vehicles. And for those who have vehicles that are valued at more than that, well, they could have a rider on their policy and they have to pay a little extra to compensate for the additional hypothetical and actual costs that they are incurring on everybody else. I mean, jeezy peasy. If I bump into somebody in my truck, or somebody bumps into me, let's say, the cost of replacing one of my headlights is $75 because it's an old truck and it has just a simple headlight assembly. If I were to bump into, or let's say they were to bump into me, something like a number of the new vehicles that I test drive have headlight assemblies that cost $800 or even more than that to replace. Well, the person who bought the stupid thing chose a vehicle like that. They chose to assume the potential and actual cost of fixing that. I don't see why anybody else ought to be obliged to pay for that except the person who chose to assume that additional liability. Anyway, I've got an article coming up at EPautos that will get into this in some depth. I hope you'll be able to stop by and check it out. I also just posted my latest Wheels Up segment with Bill Meyer over at KMED-FM, and I'll have more about the recently updated 25 Subaru Forester, which should be dropped off at my place later today. They're offering a hybrid version of it, and it's had something of a cosmetic redo, and I'll fill you in on all the good news about that in a later video. So thanks as always for listening, and we'll catch up with you again soon.